the score that the sportsbook had for you. I think I might have done that math. No, either way, we'll move on before anybody checks in. Yes?
Before we move on, I've already got questions. So, nerd cred happening here, because I don't think this is boring at all. This is the most interesting part to me. Your money line, your denominator for Rams is 200 and for Bengals it's 100. Why are those different numbers? What do those mean?
Okay, hold on. So, when you are a favorite, you see the negative 200, right? You were going to start with that 200 as opposed to the plus 165. So it's starting on different odds of just the number 0, right? So in this instance, plus 165 is actually below the number 0. The minus 200 is actually above it. So this is all American odds. There are decimal odds, there's fractional odds, there's all that. Minus 200 would basically be 1 to 2.
So the projected winner is always going to have the 200, and the projected loser is always
Yes.
going to have
The projected winner is going to have the minus. The projected loser is going to have the plus. So it's the same with this here as far as the point spread goes. So the plus 4.5 means that if they lose by 5, they have lost the bet. If they lose by 4, they have won the bet. If you bet on the Bengals. Same instance on the Rams, minus 4.5. They have to win by 5 or more in order to cover that bet. So now the money line is of course the easier way to do it, I suppose, because you're just picking a winner. But that's why the odds are different for this one. See that minus 110 as opposed to minus 200. You're giving up a lot more juice. Basically, minus 200, you have to bet $200 to win $100 on that bet. On the other side, if you bet $100 on the plus 165, you bet 100 to win 165. That makes sense? This is, none of you have heard of this guy, I would imagine. His name is Spanky. He is a professional gambler, and this is his setup. He has an entire team that runs numbers daily. Now, it extends over here, and it goes over here as well. They have 2 different setups like this on opposite sides of the room, where they are constantly running numbers, looking for edges, etc. All those probabilities that I'm talking about. If you had pulled up your numbers, and you believe that the Rams had way better than a 60-something% chance to win the game, well, then you would obviously jump on the minus 200 because you have an edge in that regard. But if you thought the opposite direction, then you can bet whatever. But as soon as you feel like you've got a number where you can hit on it, then you want to jump on it as quickly as possible. All of these computers are in real time. They are constantly updated. So their numbers are constantly updated with the sportsbook odds, etc. It's a whole. Fantasy football. We're not going to spend long on this. I'm not even going to read this whole thing. But there are a ton of different ways that you can score fantasy football. You can sign up at ESPN. You can sign up at Yahoo. You can do a deal with your buddies. If you just want to run it on an Excel spreadsheet, I would highly recommend against that because we tried that not that long ago and it is really complicated. So when you sign up at one of these different places, typically, 1 point for 25 passing yards, 1 point for 10 rushing yards, blah, 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 negative 2 points for interceptions. Every play in the game can count as a point towards fantasy football. Hence why data and numbers are so important with the game nowadays. And again, it reiterates my point that football is, in fact, for nerds as well. These are the stats that I use when I handicap football games. Now, I'm not going to let you go through all of them. You can see them on my Twitter feed, etc. But PPA margin, net points per drive, total plays per game, etc., etc. I have the actual total. I have the ranking of what they are in FBS. I do the same thing for the NFL. I didn't want to do multiple slides of that. So, but as far as that goes, what we looked at before with point total, with the spread, etc. At the bottom, this is just a random matchup, Tennessee and Arkansas last year. These are last year's numbers, obviously. If you look at the bottom here, this is my formula for coming up with the projected score in a game. And I'll scoot back here. In this situation, all of these things can equal up to, like points per play against, points per play for, etc. It all equals out to what the projected score would be. In this case, it would be 30.85 to 30.15. In that case, I don't really see an edge anywhere unless I get a field goal one direction or the other, right? If Tennessee had been favored by 4 points over Arkansas, and I've actually got this thing at a almost dead even split, I'm going to bet Arkansas in this situation. If it's Arkansas favored by 4 in this case, and I've got Tennessee actually favored when it comes to the numbers, I would bet Tennessee, etc. You have to look at where your numbers are. Again, why this sport is so perfect for recruits, right? All right. This, again, we're not going to go through all of this. This is how coaches use analytics. Now, a buddy of mine and I both are every now and then hired as consultants for different FBS football programs. These are the numbers that they won't run because they don't want to hire somebody to have to do them, so they just hire us for relatively cheaply to run these. Explosiveness, efficiency, drive, finishing, field position, and turnover. Those are the 5 factors that Bill Conley found in 2013 that if you win those 5, you are almost 100% likely to win that particular game. So they choose to try and improve on those 5 specific things. Now, obviously, you need to teach fundamentals, you need to teach how to tackle, everybody gets that, great. But as we move on, these are the different stats that actually go into those 5 factors. The efficiency is not just as easy as, we'll maybe get a few more yards on the next play. Like it's yards per play is a big part of it. The points per play is a big part of it. Success rate, third down, field position, scoring opportunities, red zone percentage. Scoring opportunities, here, we'll explain some of this. How many points were scored on drives that got inside the opponent's 40-yard line? If you can drive the ball far enough to get inside the opponent's 40-yard line, which a field, in case I didn't explain this earlier, is 100 yards in distance. It's 120 if you count the end zones, but it's 100 yards. If you can get 60 yards inside the opponent's 40, and you find a way to score from there, that's also considered finishing drives. So you want to be able to do as many of those as possible. The red zone, points scored on drives inside the opponent's 20. Once you get down near the goal line, are you efficient? Along with that turnover margin, that is the one stat that you cannot control. That is just luck. Just luck. Now, there's a lot of coaches that will argue the other way, but I'm here to tell you, it doesn't matter how much you practice holding on to the football. Every now and then, you're going to hold that thing like a loaf of bread and somebody's going to hit it out, and it is what it is. So, these are certain examples for some of the stats that we run during the season. EPA, which is expected points added, success rate, probability, efficiency, and points per scoring opportunity. EPA is, when I say expected points added, every single play in a football game can be assigned a number. And that number can determine whether or not you are a good football team or a bad football team, whether it was a good play or a bad play, and EPA measures that. So your success rate, along with any other number of things, offensive success, defensive success, your net points, your net field position, all of this gets rather bland, so I won't spend long on it. But regardless, again, you can talk to me afterwards if you would like to know about this. Game management. This is another one where the numbers come in, which is my whole point to begin with. Numbers play a huge portion of football. 4th down decisions. The 4th down bot is also something that coaches have on the sideline with them. They have the guys specifically that will get in their earpiece and tell them, hey, on 4th and 3 at the opponent 42-yard line, in this situation, you can gain 50-something% probability that we'll win if you go for it, but if you punt the ball, then we lose, 30% or whatever. They will explain all of the numbers within the 40 seconds that you have between plays, which is bananas to me. Like, it's all in real time. It's all how they do it. But in this situation, Georgia was up 13-9 on Alabama in the national championship game. Alabama has 4th and 3 at the Georgia 3. You have to score on that play if you're going to go for it. The recommendation is to go for it. Plus 5.2 win points in that situation. So, I can have to play momentarily. The success percentage there is only 39%. If you win, or if you do, in fact, get the play and you score the touchdown, your winning percentage goes up to 43%. If you attempt a field goal, it's only at 38%. So you go up 5 percentage points that you will actually win the game if you win for it, as opposed to kicking the field goal. And Alabama kicked the field goal. And of course lost the game. So we'll move on. We'll talk data jobs in football. Now, these are, of course, interesting, at least to me. But you don't have to have actually played football in order to have a job in football. I did not play football past 9th grade. I am short. I am stocky. And my stockiness would not help being an offensive lineman with the fact that I am short. So, football coach. There are multiple coaches in the NFL and in college football that have never played a down of football. Bill Belichick, who has won 6 Super Bowls, has never played a down of football in college or in the NFL. Now, he played in 9th and 10th grade in high school, but he did not play any football other than that. Mike Leach in college football, he coaches at Mississippi State now. He was at Washington State. He was at Texas Tech before that. Never played a down of college football. He only played 9th grade high school football. And he did not get a degree from a usual place. He got his from the United States Sports Academy, which I believe is located in Mobile, Alabama. I didn't even know it was a real school until he mentioned it, and then I had to look it up. But Mike Leach, yeah, he got it from a sports academy, whatever that is. And there are other ones as well. Dave Aranda, who is the new head coach at Baylor, he was the defensive coordinator at LSU and at Wisconsin before that. Again, no college football experience, no NFL experience, but you got the mind, you got the numbers, you can be incredibly successful. All of these guys, by the way, have won conference championships, which is pretty good. And of course, Bill Belichick, Super Bowls, everybody knows that guy. Who? All right, Jimmy Figueroa, the odds makers. Somebody has to set the lines. Somebody has to run the numbers. These guys run the sports books. They set the prices that you will pay. That -4.5 that I mentioned earlier with the Rams and Bengals, he set the initial line. He was the first one to do it. He's over at South Point, and he continues to be to this day. He started in the early 70s and is still doing it. Now, there's a lot of younger guys as well. Guy named Jimmy that I know runs the one at Circa in Las Vegas. He's like 39 years old. Really smart guy. But as long as you got the numbers and you know what you're doing, you're good. Pro gamblers. I would never put myself in this position. I enjoy gambling on football. I enjoy gambling $10 to $20 on football. This guy puts thousands and thousands of dollars on each individual game when he finds an edge. His name is Spanky, by the way. That's the guy I was talking about. And he's been doing this for a very long time. If you get really, really good, you yourself can get kicked out of a ton of sports books. So, once you start winning, they will find a way to not let you place a bet. CFB Fast R, data analysts. As the sign says here, when you code good, you know good. When you know good, you play good. When you play good, they pay good. Data analysts, they collect on-field and off-field data. They analyze and interpret the data, looking for insights. Data analysts could be anything from the guy that calls the headset during a football game, or it could be any other number of things, right? Somebody that takes the sports nutrition information, how much, how many carbs, how many macros. You've all seen the apps, right? Everybody tries to lose weight. We all get it. Calories, carbs, etc. They do the same thing for football players. They've all got strict schedules. They've all got weightlifting schedules, etc. And there is, of course, the media and writer aspect of it. That is what I do. I write about the sport. I talk about the sport. I run my own numbers, and then I try and tell everybody which direction they should go, and I'm successful about 54% of the time, which is actually good. So in this sport, it's a little different. As far as example websites, if you would like to see more, you can always hit me up. But Football Outsiders is a good one RBSDM, that is a big one for the NFL. Along with that, college football data, NFL game data, CFB-graphs, etc. All of these provide completely different data analysis, which is kind of strange. That's it. You know what I'm talking about. All of them provide different numbers for every little thing you can come up with. A third down percentage. How often does this team run the ball on second down, etc. They've all got different things. So, along with that, thank you. I appreciate it. You can find myself on Twitter. I'm at Gary WCE. And if you got more questions, I will continue drinking in the corner over here. So, thank you. Q&A? Yes. Here, you go ahead. James, is that right?
Yeah, okay. I get that 92 is the beginning of fantasy football and the beginning of popular granular data analysis.
Right.
Behind the scenes within the industry, was it at that level before 92 or was that the dawn for everyone?
So in 96 is when fantasy football was. In 99 is when it went widespread, and no. Honestly, it was not. Data analytics inside of the industry, in the NFL, in college football, etc., didn't really get popular until about 2012, 2013, because you still had a lot of the old heads around that basically coached based on feeling, right? It's like, I feel like this player's better, even though the numbers would tell you differently. He was never looking at numbers, right? For perfect example, basketball. Lionel Hollins was the coach of the Grizzlies for however many years. He ended up fired eventually. But he didn't want to play Tony Allen, right? Everybody loves TA. Everybody knows 9. But the numbers would say that the Grizzlies were insanely better with Tony Allen on the floor than they were without him. Lionel Hollins didn't like him because he couldn't shoot the ball, because he wasn't very good on the offensive end, but he more than made up for that on the defensive end. The numbers would tell you that they were significantly better with him on the floor. College football, the NFL was kind of the same way. You still had a lot of guys that had been coaching in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that were still coaching in the early 2000s. Once you got to about 2010, you started seeing younger coaches come in, and then data really started to take hold in the sport, which is why you see a lot more teams go for it on fourth down now. You don't see nearly as many teams kick a field goal on 4th and 2 at the 3-yard line or whatever it is, right? Your winning percentage goes up if you take those chances, if you are more aggressive. So, you had a question.
So, I think I might know the answer to this, but what is explosiveness?
Explosiveness. Hey, all right, this is fun. Let's go back.
How did they actually define?
Here, this is one. Nope, that's not gonna happen. This. Okay. This, where did I put it? Explosive play rate. Offensive. I have completely. There we go. Offensive explosiveness, right there. 1.3. Now that is just a explosive play rate. It depends on who you ask, right? With my numbers, an explosive play is any pass that goes over 12 yards or any run that goes over 8. For other guys, like Parker, the guy that I work with that did this one. So Parker, he believes it should be any play that goes over 10 yards. I don't necessarily agree with that, because a run play that gains 10 yards is a lot more difficult than a pass play, but regardless. It goes a lot further than a typical play, right? And so your yards per play is going to be somewhere, if you're a really good team, somewhere around 5 to 6 yards per play. An explosive play will go maybe double that. So that's explosiveness. But that number that I look at is the explosive play rate. He doesn't have explosiveness on here. I don't think. Mine, this is the rate, right? Explosive play, explosiveness. 1.3, basically, it's how many explosive plays, either a pass over 12 yards or a run over 8 yards, do you have per number of plays that you've actually run.
Okay, so I did not know the answer, so thank you. Appreciate it.
Anybody? Yes.
So you mentioned on-field and off-field analytics. How deep does off-field analytics go?
ridiculous.
Yeah, like
It's
rumors.
ridiculous. So when it comes to, oh yes, they are aware. Now this sounds a little. You and I talked about this, about things that were unnerving when it comes to iPhones, etc. College football players in most big programs, especially the Power 5 programs, right? SEC, Big Ten, etc. Their players wear trackers, right? So if you've got a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, etc., all of those numbers are then populated into spreadsheets that explain to the coaches exactly how many hours of sleep this guy got, how many hours he was active yesterday when they didn't have practice, etc. So it's all. It's not public. Like I could never pull those numbers.
So what I was kind of thinking is, from your perspective,
Yeah.
how deep does that go as far as like people who don't have access to that data? Are they looking at like, does this person like party or does this person like,
Okay, so you can pull some of those numbers, right? Especially if you were hired as a consultant from one of these bigger schools. Like, now they don't give you everything, but they do give you some instances, right? They'll give you some information to figure out, hey, we need to figure out how to better utilize this offensive line. What kind of run zone scheme should we use? What should we, et cetera. In that instance, they're going to give you, hey, this guy weighs this much. How much should we weigh in order to properly utilize him as far as blocking, right? And that kind of stuff gets really difficult to try and nail down. It's like, well, all right, so this offensive lineman weighs 290 pounds. He'd probably be better if he was 300, but not if it makes him slower. So how can you increase the speed on? That's where the nutritionists and the sports scientists, et cetera, come in. Now I don't care about those, thank God. But when it comes to these different numbers, yeah, like that kind of stuff we can help out with. When it comes to partying, you're not going to stop a college kid from partying. Like, it's not going to happen. So, anybody else with a question? Yes, you. Hold on, what's your name?
Frank.
Frank. Nice to meet you.
So these numbers are all run per game, right? So then are they run per player per matchup?
Per play. Yeah.
Per play.
Per play.
So
Yeah.
there's a defensive tackle and or a defensive end and an offensive end
Okay.
going against each other, and one of those two players is injured. Does that dramatically alter some of these?
It depends on who the backup is, right? So it can certainly change the numbers, yes. Like if you are a top 5 ranked team, right? Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, whatever. Your numbers are going to look drastically better when you're playing against Vanderbilt as opposed to when you're playing against LSU, right? Now, if you do have a matchup where somebody gets injured in a game, for instance, Alabama, Georgia in the national championship game, Alabama's offensive yards per play before their stud wide receiver, Jameson Williams, went out, so he tore his ACL in the middle of the second quarter, their yards per play were like 7.5 before that. And this is very basic stuff, but every play after that, on average, generated less than 4 yards per play. So that one player affected it, almost 100%, right? It varies when it comes to offensive line, defensive line, et cetera, because it's tougher to, there's no real number associated with that, right? When you're a running back and when you're a wide receiver, et cetera, you have tangible yardage attached to it. When it comes to offensive line, defensive line, then you get into, all right, how far down the field, and the NFL is way better at this than college is. How far down the field did you block? Did you win your block, et cetera? And the NFL has all of this information. They have guys that are constant. They have enough statisticians that they are watching each individual player on the field and then logging what they did in that exact time. It's bananas. So college is a little more difficult. I know I had somebody else that had a hand up. Oh yes.
Real quick, the sinister looking old guy that said Tell me I'm wrong.
His brother, by the way, is named Sonny Vaccaro, and Sonny was the head of Adidas and at one point the head of Nike basketball. So all of the youth basketball that went on in this country between the 80s and the mid 2000s, Yeah, his brother ran all that. So,
And also his mom.
oh yeah.
Okay, so how, like, why does anybody care what he thinks? Like, how does he get to be the person that decides these things?
He.
I didn't vote for him.
No, look. Exactly. Nobody votes for the odds makers, right? He started this because he moved out to Las Vegas back in the 50s, 60s, etc., when sports gambling really became a thing, right? Sports gambling, for the most part, in the early 1900s was horse racing and boxing.
Right.
Once you get into the 60s, which is when the NFL started, and you had the NFL and the AFL, two completely different leagues, and they would play each other, and it was not all utilized correctly.
Right.
But they ended up coming together and forming just the NFL back in late 60s, early 70s, whatever it was. He would run numbers, and he was the initial guy that really had the best analytics. But he would do it all on paper. There was no computer system to come up with, so he would set the line. Joe Namath, like Broadway Joe, back in the Super Bowl III, whatever it was, when he said that we were going to beat the Colts. Well, the Colts were a 7.5-point favorite at that point over the Jets, and the Jets guaranteed a win. Joe Namath did. He was the one that set the 7.5 or whatever based on the numbers that he could get at the time.
So he was literally just the biggest nerd in football, and that's
Yes.
why he got the job.
1,000%.
But he's still good enough.
He's still doing
good
it.
at football.
Now he's got a whole team that's around him now.
So he's
And the South Point is not exactly the nicest casino that's out in Las Vegas. The South Point is the oldest book in Vegas, but it's not the nicest.
Oh, so each place that you go to, they're going to have different odds?
I will say this, there are some places that will have, yes, they will have different odds. That's why they tell you to shop for your odds, right? So I had that example of the Bengals and the Rams Super Bowl odds. You could have found the Rams at -3.5. You could have found the total at 49 or 50. You have to search for each individual one. But I will tell you this, there are some sports books that just straight up copy other people's odds.
Sure.
Because there's 4 billion of them. So,
No idea.
but that's where you find your edge, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you have a certain number, hey, I think it's going to be this. I didn't get into this. There are key numbers when it comes to, I'm shifting back and forth. But, there are key numbers in football, not so much in basketball or baseball or whatever, but in football because of the scoring setup, right? Touchdown counts as 6 points, and then extra point is 7. Field goal is 3 points. Safety is 2 points. There's a certain number. How about this? Over the last 10 years, the average NFL game ends on the number 41. That's the total number of points scored in the game. If you bet 40 and you bet over, you're going to hit that 6 out of 10 times. If you bet under 42, you're going to hit that 6 out of 10 times. It's all key numbers, right? So, like with this, with the Bengals and the Rams, Rams favored by 4.5. They won the game by 3 points. Like if they had won the game 21-17, they would have won by 4 points. That 4 and 3 are both key numbers. So there's quite a bit. I've gone a long time over what I'm supposed to. So, thank you all. That's really appreciate the question.
Thank you, sir. Here, let me slide that off. You are way there. I don't know how I could possibly do that.
Well, thank you very much, Gary. Thank you, everyone. So what we're going to do, a little different than Nerd Night's past, what we're going to do is we're going to have a little musical interlude. It's going to be an intimate concert. I would encourage everyone to go grab like 5 or 6 beers and tip your bartender very well. And Brian and I are going to get set up and play a couple songs for you guys.
And while they're getting set up, just FYI, the kitchen closes at 8:30. So if you want some more snacks, some more food, the food in the back of the kitchen will stop at 8:30.
And I actually had a question. Very nice. So it was difficult to put this thing together. Just trying to come up with, okay, what is
At least when I'm involved.
While we're getting tuned up here, I want to say thanks again for that presentation. That was really, really interesting to me. Oh my God, I had no idea. Like, there's this whole part of the world that I didn't even know existed.
Alright, so we picked a few songs that are hopefully theme appropriate here.
We tried.
This first one is a Todd Snyder song, which we'll dedicate to Gary.
Directly on point.
Well, they say that 3% of people use 5 to 6% of their brain. 97% use 3% and the rest goes down the drain. I'll never know which one I am, but I'll bet you my last dime. 99% make their 3% 100% of the time. Well, 64% of statistics are made up right here on the spot. 82% of people believe it, whether they're accurate statistics or not. I don't know what you believe, but I have no doubt. I need another double shot of something that makes there's too much to think about. Too much to think about. Too much to figure out. Caught between hope and doubt. There's too much to think about. In fact, I might just pick it out. Well, 90% of what you learn in school is just some bullshit you never need. 80% of what we got, we bought just to satisfy our greed. Because 90% of the population links possessions to success. Even though 1% of the 80%, let's do that again. Hit it on the G. Even though 80% of the wealthiest 1% drinks to an alarming excess. More money, more stress. Too much to think about, too much to figure out. Caught between hope and doubt, there's too much to think about. Well, I hear that 91% of sports statisticians truly love their jobs. And the average bank robber lives within about 20 miles of the bank that he robs. And there's a little bank not so far from here I've been eyeing for a while. Lately all I can think about is how I want to go out in style. Too much to think about, too much to figure out. Caught between hope and doubt, there's too much to think about. Yeah, there's too much to think about, and too much to figure out. Caught between hope and doubt, there's too much to think about. There's too much to think about.
The sports theme is, I got called out about this, just literally on the way here. A friend of ours that we play some music with sometimes, we said that we had a sports theme tonight. He was like, let me guess, Brian picked a song that's only sports related because of the band name. I'm like, yes? So my stretch here is we're going to do The Way by Fastball. They made up their minds and they started packing. They left before the sun came up that day. As into eternal summer sliding. Where were they going without ever knowing the way? They backed out the wine when they started talking. They had some more important things to say. When the car broke down, they started walking. But where were they going without ever knowing the way? Anyone can see the road that they walk on is bad when they go. It's always someone who never gets cold. They'll never be hungry, they'll never be old and gray. You can see the shadows wandering off somewhere. They won't make it home, but they really don't care. They're walking the highway, they're happy to live today. Children woke up and they couldn't find them. They grabbed before the sun came up that day. Just drove up and left it all behind them. But where were they going without ever knowing the way? Anyone can see the road that they walk on, paved with gold. It's always summer and never gets cold. They'll never be hungry, they'll never be old and gray. You can see the shadows wandering on somewhere. They won't make it home, but they really don't care. They're riding the highway, they're happy to live today. Take it away, Jim. Anyone can see the road that they walk on, paved with gold. It's always summer, they'll never get cold. They'll never be hungry, they'll never get old and gray. You can see the shadows wandering off somewhere. Won't make it home, but they really don't care. They're avoiding the highway, they're happy to live today. All right, now this next one really is truly sports themed. Like literally as sports themed as I think a song can get. All right, you ready for this?
Brian Sable, everybody.
Thanks.
Jimmy, everybody. All right, I'm going to sound tech for a little bit, Jim. If you want me to, I'll take care of the instruments if you want to get working on our next contestant.
Brilliant.
What I'm saying is, I think they're doing like simulated situation. We're not playing a dire game. It starts out as a specific situation. Because you'll watch it.
Okay, folks, we're going to roll into our next talk here. It's going to be by Sean Laddie Hoyt, sorry. So, since 2010, Sean has served as a roller derby official in over 600 games, including many playoff championships, tournaments. In 2018, he served as tournament head referee for the International WFTDA, which is the Women's Flat Track Derby Association Championships, held in New Orleans. He is currently a WFTDA Level 3 certified official and affiliated with Memphis Roller Derby, and he's going to be talking to us about that tonight. Give it up for Sean. Alright, so let me get you your things set up here. That's your
Gary is clearly more comfortable talking to me than I am about doing this. He's got a lot more practice. How's that?
Kind of get close up.
You know?
Alright.
I listen to podcasts. I know what's up. I gotta get into it. So yeah, I wanted to add to that talk. It was fascinating. I bet I think once at NCAA championship I won only because I took a bunch of last guesses, but I was the only one that that Notre Dame was going to be better than they did. I think they were because I'm from South Bend, so
There you go.
yeah, I got lucky. But so thanks for the intro. So this is going to be the beginning is a little bit of a history lesson because I know it's a relatively young sport that has come out of entertainment sports. Maybe people aren't familiar with where we're at now as a sport and how it's evolved. So the origins and evolution. So this is the part I think a lot of people don't realize. So it started in the 30s as a Depression era contest, really. And this is back when they would do competitions like skate-a-thons, and this is really what it was. It was a marathon, and the person who skated the longest won like a hand or something like that. I mean, really, it was along those lines. And so it went from there, and obviously people saw there was interest in it, promoters got involved, and it became more competitive. Usually predetermined winners, theatrics, and this is really the start of it. Then from the 50s to 80s, and I kind of lumped 3 decades together, but it largely was traveling road shows, spectacle, television broadcasts, things along those lines. It wasn't always predetermined, but it really came out of professional wrestling and entertainment sports at that time. So, in the 90s and 2000s, I don't know how many people remember Roller Jam. There's also Roller Games, which was wildly different. They had a figure 8 track, which is pretty ridiculous. But Roller Jam really attempted to build on that bank track roller derby of the 70s and 80s. So I believe the design was relatively the same. A lot of people recognize the bank track. I think I'll get into the track and why we no longer use that. Pretty obvious reasons. But yeah, this was a short-lived TV show. Actually, funny thing, a couple of the guys, because it was COVID, there was hands in these teams in roller jam. 2 of those guys still play roller derby. They play flat track roller derby for the Men's Roller Derby Association. So they're on the show. So in 2004, and the details are foggy about how this happened, but it came out to Austin, Texas, and a group of people got together and wanted to take that old sport and modernize it. And it started the United Leagues Coalition. It was later rebranded a year later. the Women's Flat Track Derby Association. There are over 400 member leagues in 6 continents at this point. It's fluctuating a little bit. Some leagues are consolidating, and I'm sure some leagues are forming. And there's also flat track leagues that are not affiliated with the WTA. They're independent, they do their own thing, but they use the rules. So this is like the official league and the competitive structure. So they manage the sanctioning, grievances, rules, rules revisions, things along those lines. So in 2006, here's another bank track thing. A&E came up with this show, Roller Girls, and this was really the first wave of expansion leagues that included Memphis Roller League. And so, despite it being bank track, this spawned flat track leagues to start, mainly because they didn't need to have they just wanted to play roller derby. They saw the skating and the outfits and the nicknames. I'll go back. Laddie's actually is the name my friend gave me. A lot of people like puns. I decided to stay away from pun names. There's Referenstein and Ragnar Auto and all kinds of weird names like that. Skaters, I leave the puns to the skaters. They're much better at it. But yeah, so Roller Girls was the first big kind of mainstream expansion. The next thing was Whipping, and this was big. Again, bank track. The movie's about bank track derby, believe in LA. And this was Drew Barrymore's first movie she directed. And since then, over 3,000 leagues have been started. Vast majority flat track. But yes, so Whip It was a big thing. We often talk about we need to do Whip It, especially post-pandemic. But that was a big part of it. So, current day in the future. So, obviously, things happen. And a full contact sport that is mostly played, largely played by amateurs that have day jobs, there was an overabundance of caution. So we were just now starting, and Memphis started back to practice about a month ago. We had to find a temporary spot because District Music Festival is taking, or Memphis and Bay is taking over the fairgrounds, which is where we practice at the Picnic Building and play. So a little bit of that. But a lot of leagues are starting to come back. New Zealand, Australia came back actually first because of their stronger COVID policies. They've had some issues since then, but they were returning to play. Europe is starting to come back. But for the most part, and this is no surprise to anyone, West Coast, even more southern leagues, they're already playing. I know the eastern side of Tennessee has been back for a while, so it's starting to come back. So we're working on it. Like I said, many leagues are doing practicing. Some leagues are consolidated. A lot of things that happened being an amateur sport and being volunteer ran. There's no owners really. It's membership driven. You're bound to have conflict. A lot of leagues will splinter. It's amazing Memphis never has. A lot of leagues have. Bigger cities usually can support more than one league, especially when you have a single size Chicago, they have 3. Because it's a big city, it's hard to get around. So New York's got a bunch. But I think this is a good thing. Consolidation, I think things got a little bit too big too fast. So hopefully those leagues, all those leagues are like 10 to 15 people. So it really needs to be more like 20 people, if not bigger. So that's a good thing. WFCDA, who's the biggest governing body, there's a lot of governing bodies. Like I mentioned, the Men's Roller Derby Association, there's the JRDA, Juniors Roller Derby, which never stopped. They kept playing through the pandemic because parents, I don't know, I can't explain it. Yeah, it's weird. So there's a lot of governing bodies, but WFA is the biggest by far. They had not had a postseason since 2019. So no playoffs, no championships. It was again suspended this year. May return in 2023. There's still a wait and see kind of thing. When you suspend gameplay for 2 years, it's really hard to figure out how that's going to restart. Yeah.
Is there like a season? Is there like an amount of time that's for months that it's played?
Yeah. Well, so it's kind of all year round. It depends on. So Memphis, it's fall winter. That's how. So some leagues typically. So this is where it gets weird. When I speak of league, you may think of team. So Memphis Roller Derby is a league. Within that league can be multiple teams. So they used to have home teams. They're actually bringing that back. They went when I moved here in 2013. They went to an ABC team structure, which a lot of leagues have done when they got small, but a lot of leagues like Windy City in Chicago, they have home teams, they play home games. Our rival in St. Louis, their entire home season just home games. Their sanctioned games, their competitive games are all out of town. They just travel to those because they make money. They're big money makers. Typically, fans don't care who's playing who. They just want to watch football. So hopefully Memphis is returning to that type of structure. So yeah, some leagues do it in the fall, winter, some do it in the summer. It kind of depends. For the WPA, for the competitive season, that's usually fall, winter. Yeah. So, and actually, JREA playoffs are starting in June. I don't do a lot of junior roller derby mostly because parents are very annoying. And that's when I stopped doing it. But hopefully at this level it won't be so bad. I'll be traveling to Columbia, South Carolina because they're doing their open division class. So the JREA has transitioned to an open gender kind of system. They still have female only playoffs in their championships, but they also allow boys and non-women to play. So that'll be interesting. I've actually never done any Florida games, so that'll be first. So, why flat track? It's cheap. So those bank tracks can cost upwards of $10,000 to build, especially now with lumber being the way it is right now. I wouldn't even want to guess. They're also expensive to store. Where are you going to keep it? I know the LA Derby Dolls, which is probably the biggest bank track league right now, and they still do. I don't know if they're playing at this moment, but they do shows based on it, playing shows. They have a dedicated bank. They make enough money to have a dedicated place. The track stays there, goes there. So there are a few. I would say, I believe there's the RDCL, which is the Roller Derby Coalition of Leagues. They're bank track only body. They have their own rules, similar but different. And I believe there's 25 leagues in that. So it's a much smaller endeavor. But people still like it. I mean, it's still demand for it. So flat track can be played anywhere with enough space and smooth surface. The track is 105 by 85 feet, I believe. I wrote it down, it doesn't really matter, but it's big. So you need a considerable amount of space. Unfortunately, too big for your typical basketball court. Right now, we're at the church, I forget the name of it, it's on the corner of East Parkway and Poplar. They have a gym that is not used for anything but a daycare. But we were able to rent it as a temporary space. So we have a smaller track. They're working on designing alternative tracks for smaller spaces to make it even more accessible. Because a lot of leagues, there's a league in Cincinnati that was venueless for a while because there just wasn't any venues. And when you look at sports places like FedEx Forum, they're not interested in dealing with amateur sports like that. So finding a big enough space can be tough. Flat track also allowed the sport to evolve into a more strategic game. It used to be bank track was about speed. It was about, big blow-ups. It was basically NASCAR, when you think about it. It was NASCAR with humans. So it was about big hits, explosive things happening, people jumping over bodies. And what happened is the game started getting slower. It still goes fast, but it's much more dynamic now. They're too much to the chagrin of a lot of old school fans. They started calling it stopper derby or slow derby. But there would be bursts of speed and then it'd slow down and start doing basically like rugby swings. And it could be very slow. Now the game still has to move in a counterclockwise direction. It still has to go forward, but it can be stopped. It just can't go clockwise. So there's still some rules around that. Like they want things to go that way. But I personally, as an official, found it to be a much more interesting game to officiate when things start slowing down and becoming more strategic. The men still play reckless and fast, so that's you always have that. If you want to see that, go to the men's game. So, how's it played? Is there any audio in this video? Or no? I don't shoot. Yeah, I kind of.
Do you want to narrate it?
Sure, I can narrate it.
Because I think the audio is going to just come out of this.
Is it? Okay. So this is a 1-minute video that WFTD produced that does a really good job of explaining the very basics of it. And I'll kind of go over it. The next slide kind of repeats it.
Oh, you want to mic it?
Oh, yeah.
Let's see if that works.
Yeah, sure. Now, where's the speaker? This is improvising. just listen for it.
Oh wait, sorry. Oh, we're old school. I know, right?
Teams field 5 skaters at the start of the jam. 4 of these skaters are called blockers, and 1 is called the jammer. The jammer goes to home power at the start and scores points for the team.
It's actually
Players are playing with confidence and
Nice.
at the same time together, they know what is called. The 2 jammers start each jam behind the power and must get through all of these skaters for an initial pass before they can begin to score points. When the initial pass is complete, the jammer can score 1 point for every opponent they pass for a base. The first jammer would learn to play lead jam, which means they can end the jam anytime they want before the 2 minutes are over. Sounds easy, right?
So that was actually the 2015 championships in St. Paul, Minnesota. I egotistically appointed myself on the left side. That was my first championship game I ever officiated. And that is the very highest level of flag tackle. Those teams, I think one scene was Gotham and Rose City. Rose City is still the reigning champion. But yeah, really what comes down to it is pretty simple. Yeah. So 2 30-minute periods, broken up into 2-minute increments called jams, as the video said. Each team fields 5 players, 4 blockers, and 1 jammer. The jammer scores points by lapping opposing blockers, and that's really how scoring happens. So I mentioned NASCAR earlier as a joke. It's essentially what it is. So each, we call them scoring trips. So each trip that jammer makes can be 4 points. It used to be a lot more complicated. Luckily, we simplified it a little bit ago. But yeah, the lead jammer can take a jam whenever they want. The lead jammer, the video mentioned, is the first one to get out of the pack on that initial pass. The jammer free points them like this. That means they're lead. You may ask, why would they want to end the jam? It can last up to 2 minutes naturally, but it's about scoring control, offense control. So let's say that jammer becomes lead, they get out, they score 4 points. The other jammer maybe hasn't scored yet, or maybe he's still in the pack. They get in the jam, now they're up 4, right? And then the next jam starts, and then reset. Maybe the same jammer, maybe the same blocker. Usually not. They cycle people out. So that's a whole new, basically, down. Is to use a rough football analogy. Very rough. So the blockers try to stop the opposing jammer while helping their own get to the pack. And so offense and defense happens at the same time. And this is unlike most sports. So it's an interesting dynamic. So you have to help your team while hurting the other team. Gameplay does not stop for penalties, and this is why in that video you made me like, oh, there's so many reps. There's 7 reps. And one, the track is big, for one. We are always not the fastest skaters in the world, so it's a lot to cover. But because gameplay does not stop for penalties, there's a lot going on. So you may see in games, you'll see a record will call someone on penalty, they'll lead, and it keeps going. So we only have 30 seconds in between games.
Does
Yeah.
the ref stay like in a certain position the whole time? Like, do you
Yeah.
skate at all? Or
Well, yeah, we skate. Yeah,
Okay.
and I'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, in fact, in that video, the position I was doing, the outside pack ref, we skate a lot. We're basically always skating. We're all always skating, but we're skating most because we're on the outside. But yeah, I'll get into that shortly after this. I think after this slide. So penalties. I'm gonna keep this simple. This is a big rabbit hole people go down, but basically it comes down to 3 major categories. So your contact penalties, your game structure penalties, and your unsporting conduct. Very similar to other sports. Actually, when I moved here, I was indoctrinated into the cult of the Grizzlies, like a lot of people are, and got into watching basketball. And I noticed that there's a lot of similarities when it comes to the fouls that we call as far as contact goes, interference, unsporting conduct, very similar. Target zones and blocking zones. So on the left, we have the legal target zones, and this is where someone can be blocked. So, how do you do the legal zones? There we go. So you can block anywhere in the front. So hands, arms up to the collarbone and mid-thigh. So you can't block below this and above here. And on the back, you can't block anywhere in the back. This is legal on the sides. So it can be difficult to target those blocks, but that's part of it. So you get good at it.
What's it called when if you were to block from the back?
Back block. Yeah, it's a back block. So if I as a blocker, or if I as a jammer, per se, I was coming into the pack and I hit someone in the back, and now there has to be impact. So we talk about game impact. A lot of things to be illegal, but for it to be a penalizable offense, something has to happen. So in that case, a very easy example is if I hit someone in the back and they fell down, they lost position. So that's a game impact. So that would be a penalty. Now, if I hit them very slightly in the back, yeah, so something has to happen. If we, it's funny too, when we get players that never played a contact sport before, they want everything called. Like every touch, every pull, every tug. And it's like, if we did that, everyone would be fouled out in the first 10 minutes. So it'd be a very bad game to watch. So, yeah, game impact is very important when calling penalties. Some impact spectrums are tighter than others. Contact to the head, it doesn't need much. If I see someone hit someone in the head and the receiver's head moves enough with force, that's a penalty. And if they're intentionally targeting, that can be expulsion. So a lot of things are taken very seriously. In fact, in 2019, just before the pandemic, they updated the rules to make any forceful, avoidable contact to the back a penalty, regardless of impact. Because they didn't want, basically it was punishing stronger players, stronger blockers that would take those hits. And, you don't want to have someone getting hit in the spine repeatedly. So it was in response to a particular type of gameplay that was happening. So. And then conversely to that, you have your legal blocking zones. So this is what you can hit with, sorry. So you can hit, you can't use your hands and you can't use your legs. Basically what comes down to. So everyone's like, what do I hit? Shoulders. Yeah. So a lot of players will come in with their, you want to hit with the shoulder because that's a good way to break your collarbone. But they'll come in with their back. You can block with your back. You can't be hit in the back, but you can block with your back. So it's a lot of shoulder hits and a lot of hip checks. So you see a lot of the modern game. So I would say 6-7 years ago, hip checks were very common. Now it's more shoulder blocking. It's more upper body. And I would say the MRDA and the men really popularized that. They start playing like football players, upper body, So and that kind of trickled into the mainstream like women's sport a little bit more. So the blocking has evolved a little bit over time.
So that's the jammer is, which one is the jammer?
These apply to both.
These are,
everyone has the same hitting rules.
Okay.
So yeah, it doesn't matter. You're jammer or blocker. You still have to block with legal target zones, or 2 legal target zones. You have to use legal blocking zones.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, so, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused about the target zone effect. So does that mean can they grab someone's arm and pull them back?
You're using your hands though.
You're using your hands.
Initiator. You can't use your hands.
So this is this is the receiver basically. Think of this as the person getting hit and this is the person hitting. Right? You see how that? Yeah. So you can't use your hands. So even though it's illegal, hands are legal blocking zone. I can't use my hands.
So they can whack the knee and then hand with their shoulder?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Does this have everything to do with safety as
Yeah.
far as like the hip checks and whatnot, that have to basically do with
Also keep in mind you're skating while this is
right.
happening.
So the last time I went to a roller derby, cane match, whatever you want to call it, was 2013, and they would skate and then hip check, right?
Yeah.
And
Still a thing. Still happens.
so it's still a thing,
Yeah.
but So it had to do with like extremities and whatnot. That,
I mean, this has been the case as long as I know, as long as I've been involved. I think the original rule set was basically, that was designed in 2006, was basically largely this. But yeah, I think it comes down to just having an interest in game. If you have too much, safety is a big thing. Low blocking, you know, you don't want to have people targeting their legs. Exactly, because they're skating. And I think hands make it a little bit too easy. Another recent rule change, and you know, it's funny, people complain all the rules change all the time. Well, anyone who follows sports know all rules change every year. I mean, to varying degrees. But another change they made that was actually a pro defense rule change. Usually it favors jammers, and I was kind of surprised when they did this change. But it was basically, let's say I'm a jammer and I'm coming along the outside of the boundary, and I'm maybe going to fall out of bounds, and there were some jammers that could grab onto an opponent, not impact them in any conceivable way, but it was preventing them from falling out. So they made that illegal now. So even though the receiver wasn't impacted, the impact was I prevented myself from going out on the ground. So they do, as gameplay evolves, they watch those things and make adjustments to the rules. So keeps me, you know, interested, I guess, in how. So officiating. My wheelhouse. This is actually my crew from 2017. There's a lot of us. This is a full complement crew at the playoff and championship level. We have redundancies in place. We're doing a lot of data collection. Everyone in pink, actually now there's black, they got rid of the pink. Those are non-skating officials. And their primary job is data collection and penalty tracking. Yeah, we don't have a lot of data collection, but we do track some data. And there's actually a website called Flat Track Stats that tracks all of that data as it's reported. But being a volunteer sport, it's wildly inconsistent. But,
Where are you?
I'm right there. So we have up to 7 referees, 3 minimum. The rules dictate at least 3. Each jammer gets their own jammer referee because we're the ones counting the points. The jammer referee is the one dictating, deciding you pass that person, you get a point. We're doing this in our head. It's a judgment call, but you know it's usually fairly obvious. So you need a jammer referee per jammer, and you need at least 1 referee serving as the head referee. 8 to 10, well, 8 to 12, but it's more like 10 now, non-skating officials. Luckily, due to technology and the consolidation of some roles, we've gotten this down a little bit. This has always been a big, the 7 referees are tough enough, but getting that many people to do even more thankless job is tough. So I think I'd be thrilled to have you. So the referees, so we have the head referee, who also serves as an inside pack ref. They're usually in the rear. I wish I had a diagram. That was a really good graphic. That's it. Placement of where these people are. And then you have the inside pack referee. So the head referee and inside pack referee are working together to watch mostly the pack, the blockers. So they're looking for contact penalties. They're looking for legal positioning, gaming position legally, cutting, which is basically like cutting lunch line type of thing. So we're watching the pack. We're also helping the other referees communicate things. The jammer referees, as I mentioned, there's 1 per jammer, and they are sticking with that jammer all the way around. So you'll see them cycling through the infield. And then the outside pack referees, as I mentioned, as I've done often, they're on the outside, and we rotate positions to maximize coverage. So the pack generally stays within 30 to 40 feet of each other. So we define the pack as the largest group of inbound skaters from both teams skating within proximity. That's 10 feet from each other. So you could have a pack that's stretched out 80 feet. It's not very effective. They generally stay pretty bunched up. So to do that, the outside pack referees will rotate around and cover. Usually we try to have at least 2 on at all times. And the reason for all these referees is, outside we're watching the outside, inside watching the inside. We don't call things we can't see, obviously for obvious reasons. So, so it's basically just as a lot to watch. The non-skating officials, who have a head and a SO, who basically just kind of coordinates everything. They are typically also serving as a penalty tracker. Penalty trackers obviously track penalties. So like I said, as we call things in real time, we can't go over to a table and record a penalty. So as I call a penalty on a player goes to the penalty box, the MSO, the penalty tracker records it. We also have lineup trackers. These two jobs have been combined in the last few years. We call them PTLTs now. We've figured out that with good enough training, most people get really good at doing the lineup, which is basically just writing down who's in that jam, because it changes every jam. So they're recording who's in that jam, and they're also recording the penalties. Because like I said, they have 30 seconds to write down who's playing in that jam, and then for the rest of that, they just have to track penalties. Penalty box timers, you'll have, actually, penalty box manager is tracking the penalty times for the jammers. And the penalty box timers are tracking the penalty time for the blockers. You can have 6 players in the box at once. So there's a lot of time going on. It's actually one of my least favorite roles to do. I don't do a lot of landscape officiating, but I find that to be very extremely stressful because you're doing a lot of time and a lot of paperwork. So I love a good penalty box timer. Scoreboard operator. We actually run our scoreboard off of a laptops using an open source software called we call it CRG, but it was developed by the Carolina Rollerball. It's a very old open source program. There has been attempts to make the WFDA sunk quite a bit of money trying to make their own games data system. Turns out that's very difficult to do. So CRG has actually been expanded on in the last few years. Should have done a demo, but fun. To do penalty tracking, to do more data collection. When it was originally written, it was just a scoreboard, like clocks, scoreboard, that was it. So they've actually added a lot of that, a lot of stuff to it. So, and that's, I believe that project was ran by 2 officials, and there's, being open source, anyone can contribute to it, so that's been really good. And then you have the scorekeepers, it's the extra scoreboard operator. So as the JAMA referees post their scores, so as the video showed, when the jammers come through, they pass the blockers. Let's say they pass all 4. The jammer referee will hold up 4 fingers, or 3 fingers, or 2 fingers, or whatever the score is, for that trip. And then they'll show that to the scorekeeper. Very low tech, we don't have microphones or anything like that. And then the scorekeeper will write that down. So it works, oddly enough. So about MRD. So Memphis Roller Derby, as I mentioned, was in that 2006 expansion with the Roller TV show. They are a 501c3 nonprofit, have been for a very long time. And I believe their formation predates my involvement. I started in 2010. Obviously through math. And then we practice and play in the Pipkin building, the Memphis Fairgrounds. If anyone's ever been in the Pipkin building, it is probably the loudest venue I've ever played in. And like Jim said, I played officiated 600 venues. It's very echoey, very loud, but it's very large, and it's been a good place. Hopefully, they don't demolish it. I know there's been a lot of talk. It seems like every year someone wants to wreck the Pipkin. I'm like, it's fine, just let it be. So Memphis Roller Derby is doing a June 5th boot camp. I believe it's 5 weeks. It's $15. So I don't know if anyone's interested in just coming over and skate. So that we're hoping to rebuild a bit. Like I mentioned, there's some talk of doing home teams again. So there was a lot of interest in the pandemic, a lot of emails. Unfortunately, we weren't doing anything. So hopefully some of that will pan out and get some expansion. So that's what we're hoping for. So I don't have to drive 7 hours to referee roller derby, which I would probably do anyway. Join us. Service coaches, volunteers, you can email memphisrollerderby@gmail.com. Officials, memphisofficials@gmail.com. Actually, just got that 2 weeks ago. Either one will work, but So that's Memphis Roller Derby. That's Roller Derby in a nutshell. So I know, there's a lot more. If you're interested in learning more about the WFTDA, WFTDA.com, and that can spawn you off in a bunch of different directions. But any questions? Oh yeah, there you go.
Okay, so have they talked to you about moving from the Pipkin building into the new Liberty, whatever area?
No. So, we were offered to, and I don't know if anyone went on it. I don't know what happened with there. I know there was an offer to give us a tour of the Mid-South Coliseum. I don't know what's going on there. Which again, I thought was on the demolishing list. But now, it seems like every couple of years, and I moved here in 2015, so I'm still catching up on my, how the city works type of thing. But it seems like the Coliseum comes up every year or two, and I remember when Wiseacre wanted it,
Oh, yeah.
and that kind of fell through, and so, no, I don't think the new building has been, and that's changed a lot too, right? Like the plans for that expansion has been like halved, from what I understand. So it's a wait and see thing. I know even though Pipkin's widow wanted it demolished, she thought it was holding back development. I know U of M uses it for pepper alleys. Flea market uses it. It's still used. It's still, to find a building that size with no pillars is very unusual. And we actually have 2 tracks set up, which is unheard of. We have 2 practice tracks in the same building. And so, when we left it, it didn't leak. It's a little leaky now. They did put some money into it in 2019, some fresh paint, some baffles, new lighting. So that, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I hope it's just bluster. I was reading about the fairgrounds history, and apparently there was like 14 buildings. There was a casino on that, in the 60s. And so, the building I think is really neat is the building behind the Pavilion, which is the women's building, or now called the arts building. It's in much worse shape, I guess, than the Pavilion as far as, and they were using it for, I think, a VIP area for Bristol Music Festival. They staged it for something because they were doing work in there.
When the Mid-South Fair was still there, they used it as where they would actually place all the art.
Yeah.
Right? And that was, well before they moved over to South.
So the league is, if anyone knows about commercial real estate, the league is always looking for a warehouse. It is nice to have the picnic because it's unusual to be able to practice where you play, and that's a benefit. But I think it's a business, we understand it. When something big comes along or they need a building, they get kicked out, it's just the way it goes. So I think they're always looking for a space. You think if you want a warehouse space in Memphis, it's kind of hard to find just the right spot, either floor conditions or maybe it's really far away part of town. So they're always on the lookout. Unlike a lot of leagues, Memphis has a nice amount of money. They've done a good job of they have low overhead, they've had good deals for this building. So I come from some leagues that are flat broke and don't have a lot of money. So they're looking for opportunities to find either practice space or something else. Because you never know. You always got to wait. So.
The bunch that you guys are involved with, is it the same? So the Cleveland Indians in Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
Switch to
the Guardians. Yeah.
Is that the same?
So that's MRDA. They're a men's motor league. They play under the same rules. I'm actually going to an event they're hosting called the Summer Fair. It's a all-day scrimmage type of thing, and they're hosting it in August. The Guardians are. I know a lot of the Guardians. I met the owner. It's owned by one of the team members. That is a rare situation where in the MRDA, some teams are privately owned. There are still some women's leagues that are. Memphis has been a non-profit organization for a long time. It's governed by a board. There is no owner per se. So corporation. But the Guardians. No, I don't know how much money they have. I know that when that got mainstream news, that they were basically, for those who don't know, the Cleveland Guardians have existed for many years before the Guardians baseball team decided that was going to be their name. And not only did they take the name, they also pretty much ripped off their logo too. It's pretty close. And so there was a money, there was a payment initially, but I guess it got really kind of wasn't very much. And so the Guardians baseball team basically got kind of shamed into giving more money as they should have been. Legally, they may have been on concrete footing. I'm not sure how tight that was. Yeah. I know copyright can be kind of fuzzy, especially when it's like,
So that would have been a service. So the issue would have been not so much copyright as much as service. Like the idea that it's like a band name.
Yeah.
You don't have to copyright your band
and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, so it's, it becomes as much a marketing implementation as anything else. It could still be but like baseball team to market it as the Guardians, probably not without getting
It's not a good look. It wasn't a good look for the Guardians. Also, they're also dealing with the racists that were angry about the name change to begin with. So it was a double. They had a lot of problems they were dealing with. Yeah. Well, I mean, my understanding is they did their homework, but just didn't care. And this has happened before, and that was my understanding. Is like they thought, oh, this league of screw 'em, basically. So, and this has happened before. In fact, the shoot, I'm blanking on the name. There's a women's league in California, with LA. Angel City. So there's a soccer team called Angel City. And they fairly new, and they just decided, Angel City, we're a good name. Now, you can argue Angel City is a little bit more generic, but Angel City will they've been around for a long time. So this has happened before, not to that scale. The Guardians was definitely the biggest thing that happened. So yeah, it's tough to be respected in baseball. Sorry. Oh yeah, please.
Like your thoughts on inline versus regular skates?
So the rules do dictate that they have to be on quad roller skates in the Liberty. Officials, referees can wear inlines. There are very few that do, mostly because they're mocked. Actually, a good friend of mine, he's a pun man, Major Wood, who's a woodworker, and he's a head referee for Nashville rollerblades. So now Nashville roller derby. A lot of things have dropped the rules. So that happened 5-6 years ago with the gender inclusivity. We forgot to mention that Memphis is co-ed, not in their sanction team like the travel team, but they welcome all genders to play. So a lot of these have adopted the same policies. But yeah, he skates in lines. He's actually very, very good, and they don't make fun of him because he's very, very fast. And he has been on a lot of championship playoff tours too. Usually does outside pack rep because he's faster than any of us on quads. So inlines are great for speed, not great for stability. Is where it comes down to it. So I think that's the biggest reason why quad skates are still the primary skate. Is if you notice inline skate boots go up to your mid calf. Well, that's so your ankle is the same half. So whereas my skates cut off of me. I wear low cut skates, and so my ankles are fully exposed. So that just kind of shows you the stability over speed really comes out to it. So it gets asked a lot. People always ask this. Inline was the most recent popular skating. Quad skating has had a bit of a resurgence. There's, thanks to TikTok, there's a brand of skates called Impala. They are cheap garbage, but people are buying them and they are skating, which is all we want. Yeah, my first pair of skates were also garbage. So, and now my skates cost more than my first car. So, yeah, but I've had them for 10 years, so, it's an investment at that point.
Hopefully it wasn't a very good car.
No. Yes, sir. So this boot camp is going to play a lot into it. We're kind of taking a look at the attitude. We just started doing some light contact at practices and hoping to be full contact in June with this boot camp. I think the hopeful projection is late fall, early winter. So similar to the previous schedule. So we'll see. It may be only 2 or 3 games. I'm not exactly sure, but that's the hope. They're really anxious to get back to it. That is their primary source of money too. There's those early games. I mean, they do some fundraising outside of that. They will be doing. Well, the hope is, I believe this year they'll be doing their annual burlesque show, which they used to do at High Tone, will be at Black Lodge this year, and they've done that for the last decade. I think it's a thing that it's a big thing they do, and it's they do a silent auction, they do a burlesque show. It's mostly comedy. People move around, but it's been pretty popular. So yeah, that's the hope. That's the hope this fall. So we'll see how this goes. Hopefully, get enough people interested and get people back to practice. But so far, it's going well. So yes. A little bit. Yeah. So I started when I first started like that into men's. more opportunity. Not a lot of people wanted to officiate it. So, and at that time they were terrible. These teams were clearly strong. They were clearly great skaters. A lot of these skaters came from Florida, where they were still doing like show skating, jam skating, stuff like that. Tremendous athletes. Couldn't play the game for crap. I mean, very bad. They didn't know the rules. They didn't know how to play. They got good very quick. But what I got used to is the bigger impact structure, way harder, way faster. What I was used to. Because my first league in South Bend was a Division III, like way down, very low level of play. So me being exposed to that level of play got me ready for the higher level of women's play, which is about equal. So when you get up to the higher, like the top 12 women's leagues, they're just as physical and aggressive as the men's leagues. So that's where I've only done maybe a dozen adult co-ed games. Done a lot of scrimmages and stuff like that. It can be hit or miss. I think most people just kind of equalize themselves a bit, You'll have situations where someone will play too aggressively, or it doesn't. I find it on both sides. But like I said, the juniors playoff is co-ed, and that'll be interesting to see. I have not seen much co-ed games, but typically what I've seen so far is, especially in Memphis, you'll have two guys. You'll have two men out of they're super outnumbered. So I would love to see a men's league here. I'd love to see a juniors league. It's just I have to get this going first. But I think at most we maybe had 2 or 3 non-women showing up, and I'm using weird gender terms. But actually WT has a gender policy. It's on the website. I butcher it, it basically says if you live as a woman, you are a woman. There's a lot of talk, there's some possible restructuring. A lot of people are pushing to have the W change to role. Or another word. It's tough because it was founded as a women's first sport. And so and I get it, there's a lot of emotion and politics behind that change. So we'll see how that goes. I mean, like I said, a lot of leagues have dropped girls and women from their league names. Girls also, I don't know if it's kind of rising, but they call yourself whatever you want. So a lot of these Memphis Roller has always been MID, so they never changed it. But my original name was Stop and Roller Girls, they changed it to Roller Derby. Nashville dropped girls with the derby. So someone kept it, but yeah. So it's an interesting phase, and I think it's good for the sport. I'd say with Memphis, the more people better, whoever wants to play. So, and the acceptance has been pretty good. We had one player that was a good skater, very good, who's an online skater who learned how to skate and fall. And they actually asked me at one point if he was being aggressive. He didn't stay too hard. The coaching staff actually told him to keep doing it. But there was complaints from other skaters that they weren't as good as he was. He wasn't being aggressive, he was just playing well. So there's some of that. And it's a tough thing to navigate, but it's still evolving, so we'll see. Cool, thank you.
I didn't realize this, but they close at 9. So Sean, that's where I was standing up. Because I just looked at my phone and I was like, oh dear, we need to leave. But thank you all for being here. Thanks so much again. Quick round of applause on both of our speakers. Super interesting stuff.
Hey, claps for the music.
So hit us up on Facebook. We do have other social media that I don't navigate, but hit us up on Facebook. Please present. That would be great. I want everybody here to be there and present. All right, thanks everybody. Good night.